can't but feel it when you are oftentimes on Auburn Avenue and you look up at the blue sign outside of our church, and which really is so iconic. I mean, people come from all over the country to, in the world, to take their pictures with the sign, and it tells you kind of what it means and what the church, what this means to the country and what it means to the globe, as a home for the spiritual home for social justice. I think what's, one of the other moments I kind of feel it is in conversations with many of our elders. We have people who grew up right alongside Dr. King, who went to school with Dr. King Jr., who those that were very close to Daddy King, and people who were part of the civil rights movement. So you hear through the stories of people who are in the congregation. And so I'm always struck by that. And it's a reminder. And I'd also add, on the day-to-day, it's a church. It's a church that has a mission. It's a church that has a thriving membership. And so I think that's exciting. But I think there are those moments, like when you see the sign and you're in conversations with our leaders and with members, where you really begin to feel and to see it. And certainly, there are moments, certainly on Sunday, when we talk about being an urban-based global ministry dedicated to individual growth and social transformation, we're saying it every Sunday. And so it certainly comes through. But I would say in a day-to-day, it's a congregation that is committed to doing what churches do, both around spiritual development, but also for us in terms of community engagement and action. It's kind of funny. It's less my memory, but it's a story that my mother used to tell me. So my parents met in graduate school. My mother was getting her PhD at Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts. And my dad was getting his PhD in physics at Boston University. And my mother used to say that, and my dad died when I was very young, about 2 years old. But my mother used to say that my dad used to play ping pong with Martin Luther King Jr. When he was at Boston University. And so there's, this kind of interesting, funny, memory that's, in our family story of, my dad playing ping pong with Dr. King in graduate school. I think for me is, and I think it's seeing, it's more of the visuals of the civil rights movement. The visuals from Birmingham are just vivid in terms of the fire hoses and the dogs and the bombings and then really seeing the front of the church, pictures of the front of the church of Ebenezer in those younger days, where I was still trying to figure out what was going on in the world. But those are some of my earliest memories. Well, I think people have pieces of it, and I think people do. There's a knowledge of civil rights movement. There's a knowledge of Daddy King and of the church, and so I think people have, and Dr. King Jr. So people have pieces of the history. But I think that part of our opportunity as a church is to continue to teach the history, not just of Dr. King Jr. and not just of Daddy King, but even Daddy King's, predecessor, the Reverend A.D. Williams, who was his father-in-law. And in many ways, the work of social justice is really built into the DNA of this congregation. It is, and we feel it's incumbent upon us to continue to remind people of that and to teach that. And so I think it's important to continue to find ways to teach and to tell these stories so that people begin to understand the breadth. We like to say that, Dr. King Jr. didn't just materialize like in Montgomery. He really came out of a context. And it was a context that was the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, where he really grew up and helped shape him, his mother and father, and those that were in our congregation really helped shape who he was and who he became. And also I think the reminder that, you know, he also just didn't materialize in Montgomery, like the civil rights movement just snap into existence in Montgomery, that there's generations of folks who were organizing and doing unbelievable grassroots work that before him that really laid the foundation for it. So I think we always have to be teaching, we always have to be educating about the history of our congregation, of the civil rights movement, the Sweet Auburn community. I think it's an ongoing task and opportunity. So one of the things I think that's exciting to see is you're seeing organizations, particularly community development organizations, are really beginning to make some progress around buildings, around economic development. And so you're beginning to see some of that come to fruition. I think that what I would like to see, though, is an even more visionary plan for the next 5 to 10 years around what we can do, not just along Auburn Avenue, but certainly in the Sweet Auburn community. And I think it's beginning to coalesce. I think it's just taking some time. And I think part of it has been, I think, in a situation where you have this investment, it takes a while to find your sea legs as institutions and then say, okay, so how do we come together and kind of figure out some collective vision for a community? And so I think we're seeing some signs of that through folks like at the Sweet Auburn Works, or through some of the other development organizations. And we also recently have started a conversation between the National Park Service and the King Center, and really looking at how our 3 institutions can begin to create what is the vision, our collective vision for the future for our institutions and our footprint here, and really beginning to think about, not just how do we bring the physical plants into the 21st century, but looking at what are what kind of additional programming can we begin to do, and also look at our own history and archiving. So in ways that we can continue to tell these really important stories, and so people can do it through multi-sensory experiences. Well, look, I think it's what you do with it. What do you do with these opportunities? I think if you let the opportunities happen to you, then there's ways in which things could get glossed over, because their agenda is to do the World Cup. Their agenda is to do the National Football Championship. So, that's what their agenda is. So I think for us is, how do we utilize this as an opportunity to really tell the stories that need to be told, to platform the stories, and to use these opportunities also to draw the resources that continue to kind of build us for the 21st century, and be able to leverage this for the ongoing work. So I think it's what this stuff can be easily glossed over, but if you allow it to happen to you, I think we're in a position where I think we can be more proactive. We can be proactive in terms of these opportunities, and really see them as ways to teach, because folks are going to come here. When they come to Atlanta, they're going to come here. And so we want to be ready for when they come. And so hopefully we can both leverage this opportunity. Maybe it leverages additional financial investment. Maybe it leverages different, intellectual investment or different movement investment. Maybe it helps leverage our own commitments to social justice that help shine a light on issues like mass incarceration and voting, that normally we wouldn't. So I think I don't necessarily see them, is essentially one thing or another, but I think the question is, what do you do with these opportunities? And for us as us as a congregation, how do we step into these and use these as opportunities to educate, opportunities to, for us as a church, know the love of God, that it is unconditional, is inclusive, and it's for all. So I think it becomes a great opportunity for that kind of engagement. I think a deep commitment to the beloved community. That is a sense of a community that is radically inclusive, a community that doesn't make judgments, but accepts, that meets people where they are, both as a part of community, and if there's help that is needed, then get the help that they need. But I think the importance of working towards that sense of radical inclusion and a commitment to the common good. For us, can't be a Christian by yourself. You can, but it's not a very deep Christianity. It is impactful. It is much more impactful and transformative when you are in community. And so that I think is, if folks heard nothing else, that would be certainly one of the things I would want folks to leave with.